Hello, viewers. I'm Yashwendra Singh, Executive Editor of ET and ETCIO, and I welcome you all to this interesting session on simplifying security and accelerating digital transformation. Businesses are trying to cope, survive, and thrive in the rapidly evolving new normal. However, the one thing that organizations have realized is that digital transformation has become imperative for businesses going forward. As enterprises ensure work from home for the vast majority of employees and rapidly modernize the core tech stack, they will have to make sure that cybersecurity is accorded top priority. The COVID-19 situation has become a fertile ground for cybercriminals and scammers. Cybersecurity has noticeably become more complicated today than ever before, and things are going to get more difficult for technology leaders in the coming times. In this topical session today, we have with us senior cybersecurity leaders who will throw more light on how technology leaders can align cybersecurity with the new normal while accelerating digital transformation for business growth. So, without any more ado, please join me in welcoming our panelists of the day in alphabetical order: Mr. Amarjeet Singh, Head Strategic Projects, Information Security, Privacy, Persistent System; Mr. Amey Subhash Lakeshri, Associate Director, Cybersecurity, Privacy, and DFIR, EY; Mr. Bala Ramanan, AVP, Risk and Compliance, Microland; Mr. Harsh Vardhan Chauhan, CISO, Max Bupa Health Insurance; Mr. Jackson Fernandez, CISO, Adani Enterprises; Mr. Mohammad Wasim, VP Cloud and Security, Publicis Sapient; Mr. Ninad Chavan, CISO, Edelweiss General Insurance Company; Mr. Vamsi Ponakanti, Head of Technical Sales, India in SARC, McAfee; and Mr. V. Swaminathan, CISO, Godrej Industries. Welcome, gentlemen.
Good afternoon, Yash.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Thank you, Yash.
Great to
Yeah,
have
hello,
all of you
Yash.
here. Yeah, let me set the ball rolling with Mr. Amey. Sir, digital is a double-edged sword. While it enhances competitive differentiation, it also increases the threat surface for any enterprise. So, as organizations rapidly undertake digital transformation, how can CISOs, cybersecurity leaders, balance cybersecurity with digital transformation? Your thoughts here, sir.
Absolutely. So when you say digital transformation is something that we are seeing from more than a decade now, right? And people are moving and adopting a new technologies like we have seen. Initially, we used to thought that we have antivirus and firewall. That means we are secure, right? And now gone are those days. And in 2021, you will see the new outlook where network security itself will be a transparent and it will disappear, right? And will focus on data more. And the of course the we'll also forget about the endpoints at some stage later on, probably after next decade we'll be only talking about the work from anywhere, and that's what things has happened. Sometimes we need a some third party push or something like that. That what COVID have done, right? And people have actually adopted this technology of working remotely, and the convergence rate, which was very low in India, has looks like we are on the top of that. That looking at even the service industry, we are actually growing much and much, and we have seen a lot of projects coming, a lot of things are evolving around that. And when we talk about the risk associated with that, basic gap which I've seen in most of the organization is the identification of the or the visibility of the end-to-end network infra assets data, that we don't know where it is. We don't know what are our shared responsibilities would be if you are adopting the cloud technology. What is our responsibility? What is the others they will be taking care of, right? So risk assessment, identification of that, and definitely protection will keep on going. And then we'll have firewall, WAF, and SIM, etc. The SIM, then we have so, etc. Right? But one more thing which is missing, which I believe, is the forensic readiness, right? That are you ready for any attack, right? We might be doing the drills and everything, but at the end, what we see is that when attack happens, everyone is the panic situation, and ultimately, they just keep holding the CXO or the CISOs, responsible for that, which is not correct. There are a lot of other internal external stakeholders who are responsible: marketing team, HR team, regulatory, DPO, etc., who should get involved. Board of members should be there for the any major incident, and then we should have the, I'll say, people, okay, who are well versed and well skilled to have a collaboration with other team members as well. So I don't want somebody who can only work on IDAM and who can work only on firewall. But they should be knowing and able to connect the dots when there is an incident. So forensic readiness is something which I believe is missing factor in today's days. Everyone is looking after only protecting and keeping the backups. Maybe they have isolated backups as well. That's the best thing. to have isolated recovery and everything from private vault. But are we really secure, or are we ready for the incident at some level? That is my question.
Sure. Great thoughts there, Mr. Ame. Let me move to Mr. Amarjeet now. Amarjeet, sir, it's true that as technology advances, so does the level of cyber risk that organizations must navigate. According to a Deloitte report I was just reading, analysts they estimate that cyber risk globally could slow the pace of technological innovation by as much as 3 trillion US dollars in lost economic value. So, how is it possible that cybersecurity as well as digital transformation, which helps innovate, they both can go hand in hand?
Thanks, Yashwant. So the thing here is, I'm going to pick up from the thread what Amey was saying, that eventually we're looking at delivering value, right? So CISOs or CIOs, what we are required to deliver is business value or stakeholders. Exposure, threat, everything is part of the game of. So if you put it in that way that, cyber is going to be creating a threat to value itself, then I think the discussion, we are taking it in the wrong direction, right? The business has a reason for existing. The organization has a reason for existing. Whatever the security people do has to recognize that they cannot stop business itself from operating, right? So you cannot create so many barriers for management. You can't come to the board and say, look, we need to stop everything. That's not going to work, and nobody's going to listen to you, by the way. So you will feel, and I get this from a lot of CISOs. I used to be CIO. I used to also go and fight with management. No, I'm not going to permit this. But you get a handle on this very quickly. Look, everything will be permitted. Nothing will be stopped. But yes, this is what we want to do so that you don't fall down. So it's like, you don't mind my analogy, it's like your teenager. You can't stop your teenagers from going and exploring the world. They have to grow up, they have to do. You have to make sure that you are equipping them not to go and fall down. So as long as we take this thing, I don't think Deloitte's idea that business is going to be hit, no. It's an input. So it's a factor into the business. I have to put effort, I have to put expenditure, and surely the revenue will be visible here. So that's my summary, sir.
Sure. Great thought there, sir. Let me come to Mr. Bala Ramanan now. Sir, despite the abundance of data breaches across the globe, security remains an afterthought for a vast majority of digital transformation activities that businesses undertake, such as mobility, cloud services, customer experience programs. Why is this so, and what can be done to ensure that security is not an afterthought and actually is in step and in sync with digital transformation initiatives?
See, it's a $1 million question, because it's about the maturity of the organization, maturity of the leadership, I would say. Like the thoughts reflected by Amey and Amarjeet Singh sir. If you look at the thinking, it's very, very different. The first and foremost thinking is to allow business to do what they want to do and they have to do. Because of them, we exist, right? And we need to be a support function there. So that's how it is. Now, the question is, why is this an afterthought? So what happens is, the basic framework should be security by design. Like we have privacy by design, security by design. I'm sure most of the organizations have learned through this, either through, from a knowledge standpoint or through an experience standpoint. And they have started rebuilding that, and they are building security by default into every initiative and everything. But the threat vectors are also changing, right? When we say what I did yesterday may not be good for today, right? So the threat vectors are changing. So it becomes imperative for an organization to keep monitoring what are those crown jewels important for me? What are those metrics I need to look for certain aspects? While that is a little reactive part of it, the proactive part is again security by design. Look into the risk assessment, look at the threat context to that, do a mapping, look at the controls. A large part of controls goes into the prevention and detection part of it. And obviously, as a plan B, yes, you need an incident response. So while nobody is perfect, right? I mean, no architecture is perfect. I mean, obviously, there will be a kind of a loophole or a vulnerability somewhere. Something is left open for somebody to exploit. And that is imperative to happen. I mean, God forbid, I mean, to those organizations who are not experienced it. But the only thing is, for whatever we know, we should be in control. Whatever we don't know, that is where IR comes in. And we need to be very clear about what is that we are monitoring, and be sure about the metrics. And that alone can, give us a confidence that, okay, I'm in control and I know what's happening.
Sure, sir, definitely. So security has to be built in rather than bolt on.
Exactly. That should be a kind of a default approach. I mean, to whatever extent what people do, while the intent is there, but there could be misses, and that's where your reactive controls, where you respond to certain situations. So those plans also have to be in place so that in case something goes wrong, you are ready to handle that also.
Swaminathan, sir,
Yes.
your perspective here, sir.
So, while all the three panelists were right in a way that, when we are implementing any technology solution, be it cloud, be it, artificial intelligence, be it anything, the CISO role comes in many organizations comes in later. And therefore what happens is you suddenly realize that, okay, these risks have not been factored. But one important thing that I would want to say is, just like the CTO has his role, the CISO also needs to step in right at the beginning. And before any implementation, he or she needs to put in controls right at the beginning of the project, right at the conceptualization of the project. Post facto things don't work. At least that is something that I have very strongly implemented in the Godrej group. We have said, you want to implement anything, we are there with you. We stand neck to neck with you. But we will put in controls and processes, key matrices, monitoring mechanisms, potential vulnerabilities, risk in the process right up front. We may not be perfect. No architecture, as Ramanan sir said, no architecture is perfect. But at least we know the known devil is better than an unknown devil. And that's where our role becomes very critical. Any initiative, that's the best foot that the CISOs can put in and are putting in such a scenario.
Sure. So Vamsi, we've heard, all top CISOs, cybersecurity leaders from different verticals having different perspectives. Yet, the underlying theme is that cybersecurity is going to be really important going forward. But like Mr. Amarjeet said, the general perception about security is that it is seen as slowing down a project, rather than enabling its success. How do you look at security in the context of digital transformation going forward?
Okay, I have a good vantage point from where I am, Yash, and I think over the last year, I've had helped businesses adopt technology faster, drive efficiency, and reduce the overall complexity when it comes to operations. And it's not been easy, right? It's been a journey that's taken years to arrive. And to the first point that Amay just spoke about, there's been external factors that just contributed. The pandemic being just one of those which accelerated that by a large degree to a majority of the things. And I love the analogy that Amarjeet sir also spoke about. It's like a teenager and they'll explore no matter what that is, right? So there are two kinds of organizations when I look at it. Organizations which have been in existence for a very long time. What the pandemic has also done is opened up a lot of new organizations, opened up a lot of new businesses that are purely born in the cloud. And they can't think about security as a completely different aspect of their technology. And that's the fundamental difference. The second factor, even for organizations that existed for decades together also, is they're taking their new initiatives under the digital umbrella overall. And that digital umbrella is starting to think with security as an integral part of the overall technology adoption. And that's the most amazing part of where we stand today. So yes, there is legacy that we will carry forward, but the beauty of where we stand in terms of taking digital first approaches is security is already intrinsic to these processes. So that's a good place to be in, right? And and where I think organizations such as ours are actually embracing newer ways of helping solve problems or encountering new challenges is where you have to marry the best of both worlds. Organizations which are established for decades together and are making that huge leap of faith from a digital first. How do you have a cohesive strategy? How do you make sure that you're always prepared for protecting what you know, both in terms of data and from threats, govern them at all times, and most importantly, then be in that reactive mode for Amesh's point? Do you have a good practice in place to be able to go and identify? It's a matter of knowing whether you're breached or not. It's no longer a question of when or if you will be breached. In all probability, you've already been breached, right? So when do you know? How do you deal with that? I think that's the place where we are and to deal with that.
Wonderful, Vamsi. Let me come to Mr. Jackson Fernandez now. Jackson, let me talk specifically about cloud, because this is one technology that has seen a stupendous rise in the last 1 year. So organizations have been adopting cloud services, I feel, faster than they can secure them. The pandemic has further given a boost to this trend, as we've seen over the last 1 year. How can a CISO get visibility and control over data and security policy management across a multi-cloud environment?
Thank you very much, Yashwendra, and thank you for having me on the panel. I see you don't like me because you kept the toughest one for me. You're asking me the elixir for youth. If we had the answers to that, then I don't think we would have the problems you're facing. Having said that, I think one of the first things is you asked about visibility across. I mean, of course, one thing is that I think the organizations also need to have a strategy in place, because what has happened in a lot of organizations is, pandemic or no pandemic, the thing is that when cloud became a reality for a lot of organizations, every function department decided, I'm going to go cloud. Now, it didn't have, let's say, a holistic approach as an organization as to where we are going, how we are going over there, or anything of the sort. So I think this kind of, and especially like Vamsi mentioned, everybody's going digital, right? Everybody has a strategy. Even old wine in new bottles is the case, even if you have an old one. So why not include, all of this as a strategy as to where we are going on, which cloud are we going on? Are we going on all three of them? Are we going to keep it as hybrid? Then that reduces the workload on the CISO's part to actually, that this is my area that I need to look at. This is where it is. Otherwise, what has happened is that, I mean, and it's not just, the three hyperscalers that we talk about Azure, AWS, or GCP. There are a ton of it. Some department doesn't have the budget for it, so let's go with Ali. Another person doesn't have this thing, so some third party has offered it, go with that. Unless this has been tied down in the organization, that you do not allow this kind of a shadow IT to spring up and perforate, we are always chasing the tail. Having said that, that is the process part of it. Then from a technology part of it, of course, there are a lot of solutions in the market to identify, where is my traffic going? Is it going only to GCP? Is it going to Azure? Is it going to somewhere else? And I start taking control of those areas. But my point is, if you haven't done part one, you will know that all this traffic is going to all these different places, and you'll go and talk to them and say, the first thing the marketing head or the finance guy will tell you, so what is our policy? Are we supposed to go to GP? And you say, oh, well, we didn't do that part. Okay. So my point is, we have to have that strategy from an organization perspective, that this is what we are going to adopt and this is what we're going to stick with. Anybody else, please move everything, all of your workloads and all of your applications and anything, whatever it is here. And we start trying to see how we can. Of course, the tools will come into place where you're, let's say, allowing certain traffic, whether it's incoming, outgoing. I'm not going to allow this to go to AWS. It's only GCP, things like that. So those will come later on from a technology perspective. So I think the idea being that as an organization, we should set that strategy and then follow it up with tools and, the technology on that front.
Sure. Sure, sir. Great. I'll come to Mr. Mohammed Wasim now. Mr. Wasim, as a company, Publicis Sapient helps established organizations, get to their future digitally enabled state. But as for your own business, I'm sure you would be leveraging cloud as well. So how are you securing and controlling data in the cloud?
Sure, I can talk about that, how we are actually securing our own house. But before that, let me share an analogy. Going back, a student of history, going back all the way to Constantinople, right, where we actually saw that big fort that was never compromised ever, but somebody out there with diligence actually compromised it by breaking the wall down, and then after that, the entire world, the entire Constantinople was down. Now we have we have been securing our digital assets like that by putting like entire fortresses around that, and the world has moved forward. World have moved to much more agile way of doing things, much more agile way of putting things in perspective in the context of what values for whom and how much, right? Because technology has moved from the back end to the front end, right? Every component of technology have an ROI and a business revenue associated with it. So we have to like really see how we can secure our society, where a person who want to get in have to get through the main gate, and then to the building gate, then to your, like, the gate of your house, where you are actually every place you are actually looking for somebody is accountable and is authorized to get in or not. So that's how we are looking at securing ourselves, where we are actually looking at person to come with authorization, and to what level of authorization, and how far the person is allowed to authorize it, right? That's how we are actually looking at, because we are moving in the future where of as we move forward, this instant gratification this young generation want, we cannot secure everything, right? We have to secure like who can get access to what. So that's that when microservices is coming in, that's where the cloud is coming in. Cloud is enabling us to go out and uh, redefine ourselves even from the job description. I will tell you like a great example. I was an excellent Solaris administrator some 15-20 years back, but nobody needs me today, right? I was the best guy who can actually slip CDs in by throwing in this mammoth AV880s. Nobody knows V880s, what are those machines now. But it's a right click and 5 minutes is done, right? And for that right click, nobody needs me. So I have to go out and reinvent myself. I have to like find out more scope for my job description, and my scope has been taken away by somebody, either being automated by the client cloud partners, or have been picked up by the developers, because infrastructure is now code, right? Same thing, we have to look at security, that do we would want to be the one main guy at the gate who authorizes everything, and authorizes on what basis to allow the person to come in, or do we want to go out when the building is being constructed, right, and make sure that every nook and corner is being looked at for security perspective. And that is where we are now putting security measures while we are writing the code. As soon as you check in the code, we check for vulnerabilities. As soon as you move it forward, we actually check for infrastructure vulnerabilities. That is all part of a developer's life, right? We do not have to wait till the end that tomorrow is my cutover, let me do a security testing today, right? It has to be embedded in our day-to-day life. Everybody should feel responsible towards it, and should be like rewarded, or basically make accountable, like why they are writing codes, right? Which can give like bigger challenges for businesses when they move forward, because as once you are hit by a breach, right, it is not that brand is getting impacted, you are actually losing business, right? So those are the things that we are actually looking at, is when we actually look at the entire digital asset, whether the digital asset is agile enough, computerized enough to make sure that if a component goes down, that component goes down, my entire brand doesn't go down.
Sure, sure,
So
sir.
that's how we are actually looking at it.
Great. Mr. Ninad, your thoughts here, sir. Given that you come from the BFSI vertical, where data is really critical, how do you ensure that you have complete visibility and it's protected in a multi-cloud environment?
Yeah, I agree to Vasu sir to some extent, where we need to have control over the change management process and not look at the last moment patchwork that normally happens. So my focus at my present organization is to get the change management process clear, where InfoSec is involved to a greater extent and has a greater visibility on the ongoing projects. Change management process has to be very clear. Uh, Second, my major focus, though technology is a very critical factor when we drive any initiative or our security initiatives, but I also focus my over here consideration should be on an end user, because most of your leakages are happening because of your weakest link, which is the end user. Proper training, doing simulation attacks, making them feed with every time you feed them with the food for thought, because what would have you done in this kind of a scenario? So what we did last time when we have our organization follows during this lockdown specifically an approach where we have a monthly meet. Entire company comes around and that's what management has given, and I force them to give me an half an hour slot where I present them, I put out a quiz, I give them with some scenarios where what would have you done in this kind of a scenario?
Sure.
A thought, a fruit for thought, where they come out of the real life scenario so that they come to know when I receive a mail from an unknown person or a suspicious looking link, what should be my action plan? So that's where I been focusing on, because most of the time, change management, all these processes are IT driven, more about when we talk about a process where we have to talk to IT, but your main link might be an end user who might click on a link and something might get downloaded. And second thing, I would like to focus where I'm being from an insurance industry where AI, ML are taking a big lead. And artificial machine learning, where we are now trying to do a judgment where I see an accidented car, I use ML to identify what is my approximate loss. In this scenario, it is very important where to understand where my data points are going to lie. I should have a clear visibility on where all my information is going to reside, where are I need to put my protection point. Technology, yes, it is going to be driven, but see, as a seesaw as a function, we should have more visibility to our endpoints where my data is going to lie. Thank you.
Sure. Mr. Jackson, you had a point to make here.
Sorry, thank you, Yashwendra. My conversation is because I think a lot of us in cybersecurity talk about the castle and moat structure. Wasim alluded to it. I sometimes feel that, we do a disservice to the defense that the Middle Ages had in the castle and moat structure, in the sense that we liken it to like a defense in layers or defense in depth. And we say that, if you breach the outer moat, then you have the outer wall, then you breach that, then you get in. The thing is that, in a lot of these instances in the cybersecurity world, we've seen that same kind of an approach, and this is what we followed for the last couple of decades or more. But the difference between what was done in medieval time and what we are doing today is, in the medieval times, when an army landed up outside your moat, outside your castle, everybody all the way in the throne room knew that there was an attack outside. It's not that only the moat knew or only the outer wall knew. The question is, has that part of the medieval defense strategy been adopted in cybersecurity today? When an attack starts happening on my firewall, does my identity protection, does my email protection know that this is happening out there? No, we wait for that wall to fall, and then we want to make sure that the next wall is still standing. The problem has been, there was a thought process behind it that I think has not carried entirely to today's cybersecurity implementation, where every layer of security knows when an attacker is attacking any particular layer. And added to that is the behavior aspect of it. Now, same thing, consider it in this way. Let's say if we use the same analogy, what we call a palki. Ladies in the Middle Ages used to come to the castle in a palki. Now, if you typically had a palki come to you during the day or somewhere when light was still available with a guard of around 20 people, you let them in. But if a palki showed up at 3 in the morning with just 4 guards, I mean, that's anomalous behavior. Do I let this palki to get in? I mean, who would travel, which lady during the Middle Ages would travel at that point in the night with just 4 guards in open country? So that was going to be, that's the behavior part of it that we have to bring also into this. That's a couple of sense on this. Thank you.
Sure, Jackson. Vamsi, do your thoughts resonate with those of our panelists here? What do you think is the right approach to securing data in a multi-cloud environment?
I think I love the analogies, right? So many analogies being spoken about, both by Jackson as well as Wasim and Bala and Amarjit sir earlier on. All analogies absolutely hold good, right? There's been an approach of the castle and the moat, which Jackson just spoke about and Wasim alluded to previously, and we've had strategies in place. The thing is that slightly, put it on its pivot and look at it from the business context. In the modern world, when you're expanding your businesses, going beyond tier 1s, going to tier 2, tier 3 cities, you're no longer just sitting inside that castle, but in fact you are making micro castles, moving to maybe say in the quest of enhancing or expanding your kingdom. Now in the quest to expand your businesses, you're going out and you've got a bunch of protection around with you. Think of that as a micro perimeter around a new service that you're launching elsewhere. So your thought process should remain the same, but it should kind of expand to a larger scenario, to use cases that previously did not exist. I think that's where the visibility of what is happening outside your perimeter to the most important thing inside. Are you able to connect that? That is where intelligence is actually playing a big key. And every part that is there in between, whether it's the wall, the soldier, or how does the soldier communicate about the impending attack to the people who make the decisions inside, and that's essentially connecting all the dots. We look at that as a connected problem, right? Everything. And if you translate that to a modern worker, in an IT world, you've got your device, which is your outermost thing that is out there interacting with everything in the world, and you've got your key assets that are sitting in some, application repository that could be in a private cloud or in a public cloud somewhere. So we see that as a device to cloud problem. That's the thing that I wanted to allude to, and protecting everything in between. So absolutely relatable topics, and I think when you compare that with examples that we just spoke about, makes absolute sense.
Sure.
Understanding your perimeters, understanding your devices, understanding where your application and data resides, that gives you the context on what you go ahead and take up your tasks as from a cybersecurity perspective.
Sure, Vamsi. Let me bring in Mr. Harsh in the conversation now. Harsh, sir, in today's distributed enterprise setup, we've seen how employees are working from home. Some have even gone back to tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities. In such a situation, in such a scenario, technology leaders will have to address issues such as data breaches and regulatory fines. How should they plan their defenses in light of such challenges?
So basically, data breaches are inevitable, right? Every enterprise has to be ready. They have to have a plan in place that how they will fight a data breach. Whatever be the reason, if your application got compromised, your infrastructure got compromised, or even my employee who is working operations from their home in L2 L3 cities, right? So they might not be having the adequate options available to work properly. So we have to work on basically on a strategy which gives us confidence that yes, if a data breach happens, this is how we can react on. So in that part, what I feel is you have to have a CCMP plan in place. You have to do multiple CCMP tabletop exercise with your ELTs, with your employees, admins, right, who handle your data, who handle your day-to-day security things. So for example, there is a ransomware breakout which happens in your enterprise, right? It might be my L3 employee who is sitting in his home and working on a remote access solution. He clicked on a link which he got on a maybe he has forwarded himself a mail, or maybe it is coming from a unsolicited sender. Then in that case also, if it is triggering a ransomware scenario for that particular person, or maybe it is infecting your servers as well, in that case, you have to be ready, right? Maybe you have deployed adequate solution. You have EDR, you can have MDR, you can have XDR, right? So there are actually two aspects of this problem: how we are contaminating the trap, and how we are handling afterwards, how we are coming back to the doing business as usual. So while we contaminate, we depend on mostly on the tools which are there traditionally, like AV, or maybe new technology which are coming up like EDR, MDR. To come back, we rely on a strong backup mechanism and your DR and BCP strategies. Even if you got hit by ransomware, or even if a breach happens for your infrastructure, you are not able to access anything. Then also, if you have a better DR BCP strategies in place, you will have control that okay, I am losing my 1 day or 2 day business at most, not more than that, and that you can easily cover by having a cyber insurance in place, which covers you on all these aftermaths.
Sure, sure. Great, Mr. Harsh. Amey sir, what do you think? What's your perspective here? Because I'm sure you've got thousands of employees spread across the country. So how do you ensure that there are no data breaches happening, or you prevent regulatory fines from paying up? What's your strategy there?
Absolutely. I mean, before we jump to the regulatory requirement and everything, we should understand the data classification. And where is my data, like what is my crown jewels, whether it is personal sensitive data, and probably we have seen the GDPR enforcement. Now, definitely draft PDPP is in place, right? And I have seen organizations are coming and actually doing the draft PDPP assessments as well, since proactively to be on the right side of the law. But there are others as well. So effectively, what happens at the end is that what we need to ensure is that all the data is tagged with some classification and they have a rights management system. We have a zero trust model built in, right, where we are actually trusting somebody, but we are verifying everyone every time and monitoring that. And definitely, based on that, the important aspect is about the awareness to the end users and everyone, right? And I'll just give you a simple example, right? Say I'm that kind of guy who doesn't care about anything, right? For example, and I'll say, what will happen if anything goes wrong? If the sensitivity data goes out, max to max, I'll lose my job. I have to pay money. I'm fine with that, right? But there are some other elements to that as well. It is our social responsibility because this money which coming with this cyber attack are being used for a terrorism purpose as well, right? So it is threat to our nation as well. So that kind of awareness to be built amongst everyone, that it is everyone's responsibility. It is not only CISO's responsible and should have a sleepless nights, right? And probably everyone should contribute to the to the best level. That is what one thing from the data classification. And coming to the PDPP angle again, I think India have converged well, very well from privacy 1.0 towards the privacy 2.0. But you are yet to build that privacy as a strategy and or as a service and jump into the 3.0. That needs to be done.
Great. Vamsi, your comments here.
No, I agree with what Amit just said. I think alluding to the point that I previously said, you don't know if you're breached yet, right? That's the point. And that when you look at it from that angle, or when you look at it through that lens, understanding what your crown jewels are, understanding what's the most important aspect of your data, and what could actually cause the most amount of harm to you or your organization, and having means to be able to deal with that, I think is the number one priority today. If you're particularly, say, in a banking or an insurance space, your consumer data, your customer data is the most important thing. And you also have a lot of implications about how you're maintaining the privacy of those individuals and all those kind of things. So being able to map out those things, how are you sharing their data with other third parties that you interact with on a day in and a day out basis? That is from a data point of view. In the process of sharing that data, you're also exposing your systems, which means that a threat in their environment is also a threat in your environment. So understanding all the different gaps that you're opening up and making sure that you have means to control those gaps, again, comes to the overall ambit of visibility. I think that's, again, a very, very important thing. So, if I recall, the number one thing is about having a strategy. What is your strategy? How are you building it? How are you evolving it? Are you continuously tweaking it based on new business models that you're working on? Are you continuously looking at changing aspects that may be outdated as a result of some new process change or some re-engineering that you have done, and continuously being on top of that? It cannot be done after the re-engineering process because that will open up far more gaps and you're looking at things in retrospective. That's the second thing. And to the third point, I think Wasim alluded to that when you're speaking about looking at infrastructure as a code and security as a code, the whole process of shift left, right, secure coding. The single most important thing that I can say is if I look at the internal trainings that most of my developers within McAfee look at, the change has been so fast and so dynamic that there's no longer an application development course that doesn't speak about securely developing applications anymore. I think that's been a massive change that I've seen just in the last 18, 24 months. And that mindset is changing and we have to continuously keep educating, right? So 3 or 4 primary pillars of that stool, and we need to be constantly in control of that. That's my view on this.
Sure, Ramsi. Thanks a lot for sharing light on those 3, 4 top pillars. Okay, moving ahead, Mr. Amarjeet, I'll come back to you, sir. So cloud delivered malware is increasing exponentially. How do you think security leaders can mitigate this risk? Because last year we saw a significant increase in cyber threats. Phishing attempts skyrocketed. COVID-19 was used as a phishing lure. There was a whopping 128% increase in malware activity in Q3 of 2020, and botnet traffic spiked by 29% in Q2 of 2020. So, with all this behind us and also, ahead of us, how do you think CISOs can be on top of this?
Yeah, okay, so thanks. I think we are down now from a risk discussion to a execution or implementation discussion. So this is interesting. So look, what is malware, right? It's a piece of code That's going to come from somewhere. And if you talk operational, I think at product levels and at people who use those products, we need to get a clear visibility of the life cycle of code. So, of course, we talked about application security, but if you talk of the kill chain, right? So, there is a cyber kill chain and there are techniques and procedures. So, you can, we are all going to MITRE now. So, the first step is, do I have enough observation? If I don't have observation, then I have to build enough observation. If you have built observation, typically what is happening is we have, as we are all aware, you have the endpoint protection people and then the network protection people. But with XDR and all these other things and security data lakes, and with source and automation, there is no hard and fast border that you can afford to leave open. So I would say closing the security silos is one way. I don't want to use the word malware actually. I want to use what is unusual. If there is anything unusual going on, I must come to know. That unusual part may be driven by business or it may be driven by a threat actor. I have to firstly understand there is something unusual. And a good threat actor will make sure that they won't look unusual. So now how do I distinguish between a threat actor trying to look usual? That's what we are finding, post entry into the organization, then sideways movement, impact, all those things, the persistent people build persistence, they will sit down in your system. So I'm not worried about saying, can we stop malware? This is too big a question. The steps involved is recognize what is happening in your systems. And I would even go back a little bit saying, let the malware be. Let me first do asset recognition. Do I know my own landscape? Do I know my single endpoint? Do I know every application running? If I don't know the applications which are running, how do I know is this malware or not? And what is malware? Actually, threat actor is going to use my tooling. So he is going to use PowerShell extensively. How is it malware? PowerShell is not malware. The arrival was okay. Gaining entry was malware. That's about all. After that, everything is going to happen with my own tooling. So my point is malware is a very small word. It appears in the kill chain. As long as I have full visibility and at every point of the visibility, do I have the ability to react? So I am also going to extend it a little bit by saying, listen, why am I waiting for the malware to have arrived? Do I have reconnaissance outside? Can I anticipate the arrival? And this is a very good forum, I am with today's CISOs. How much do we share with each other? So, for example, we are working with some security companies. We work with regulators. Vamsi is here. We work with OpenDXL, security products being able to talk to each other. So the malware word, I would not want to, narrow down to how do I stop malware. I would want to say, how do we stop unusual, undesirable activity in our entire systems, for which I should be watching out for malware reported by somebody. So, the good organizations are keeping a look on VirusTotal. They are keeping a look on Shodan, saying, okay, boss, something like this is likely to come to us also. Something new domains are coming up outside, which people are going to attack us with. And that's where the payload is going to come from. So my point is, let's look beyond the word malware. Let's look at malware is a symptom rather than the cause of anything, and then we'll get it right. Thanks.
Sure. Great, sir. Bala, sir, do you echo Mr. Amadjeet's sentiments there? And, he also made a very valid point that it's really important to be proactive rather than reactive.
I'm taking a little 2 steps back here, recalling what Jackson said, Vamsi said. I only remember Sun Tzu's Art of War. That has been my Bible and go-to book, and it's beautifully written. And every time you read it, you get a different interpretation, a different understanding of the current scenario and how we have to look into it. And it's been very helpful. Now, coming back to the question, we have to, take 2-3 steps back. I mean, we can't get into PhDs straight away. I need to do my 5th standard, 8th standard properly. I need to get my basics intact. Now, I can tell you certain things, like I completely agree with what Amarjit Saab said here. If you look at a certain hygiene part of it, right, taking cue from what Jackson also said, when we have got layered defense in depth, right? So I've got multiple walls, and if this wall is going to break, what happens to next, and how do I know? Does the king know about it? So that's where your security operations center comes in. Now, your SOC maturity, it's a completely different PhD topic, right? I mean, that's maturity differs. So each and every discussion here, the layers or any kind of a anomalous activity which is happening, there is always a context to it. So if today we are talking about a pharma industry, the context is slightly different because we can anticipate certain things. We are talking about a manufacturing setup, the context is different. Manufacturing setups having roots to Europe or US or Eastern countries, then the context is slightly different. So if you're talking about a supply chain, right, that's another source. That's exactly happened about 2017. And that's where your stuckness ransomware and everything started. So the context of a particular organization, the threat is something somebody has to understand. If they don't understand that, I can't take all the IOCs in the world and put it in my system and say block everything. I can't do that. I mean, there's no relevance to it. I'm overloading my system. I mean, the system has got certain ability to process only certain things. Otherwise, your email will take 15 minutes for you to land up in your inbox. That is not the intent, right? I mean, if I keep on scanning for every single file and every single keywords and IOCs, the queue is going to increase. Like very similarly, what is happening in the Suez Canal right now. So the scenario is very different and the context is very important. So every coin has two sides. I mean, there is a prevention side and there is a response side. I wouldn't use the word reaction. I would use the word response. Now, is it better to have invest more on the prevention side or on the response side? It depends on every organization. It depends on the risk appetite you want to take. It depends on the way you do business, and it's important to what kind of business you are in. If you are in a very critical business, crucial line of delivering services, and it has got impact on your customer as a supply chain, then prevention is always better than cure. So it will not look like, I mean, in a given situation, I don't want to get breached and have a fine, right? While my intent is not to do that, but if at all it happens, then I'm in a very deep trouble. So I don't want to get into that position. So security by design, I have to ensure that my detection and prevention controls are there and working to the favor of what I want to do. Now there's a blip, like Amarjit Sab really said, there's a blip somewhere in the perimeter. Now the SOC team knows what exactly is happening. Now I can see the blips happening in my endpoint. Now the SOC team has to correlate it. Is there some relevance to it? So the response maturity depends upon the kind of thinking and the kind of discussions businesses are going to have with the security leaders. If they don't have frequent discussions, then you will not know the context. And if you don't know the context, you don't know what you're protecting.
Sure, Bala sir. Great. Vamsi, your views here?
Yeah, so I agree, right? So like we spoke about being able to connect the dots across the enterprise or across your entire architecture is very, very important, right? How do you have threat intelligence feeds that are coming in these days? There's a lot, I'll not speak about the threat intelligence itself per se, but how do you make sense of that to their point? To what are the IOCs that are probably most applicable to me? What is the context of that? Am I even vulnerable? There can be 20,000 threats out there. Does that even bother me, right? And there could be a genuine file that is doing a lot of stuff for somebody else, but if it is causing a lot of compute power degradation for me, I would still consider that a malware. Right, to Amarjit's point, it could be a genuine file. It does not do any harm. It does not bring in any virus. It doesn't attack your system, but just consuming your power. It is still malware for me. That's the way I look at that. So understanding at all times how the impact of these kind of environments on your organization are and being able to control that forms the crux of this overall conversation from an intelligence perspective. So that helps naturally move from the SOC maturity to the point that we just heard from Bala sir in terms of what is the maturity of the SOC, where are we, and how do we take that across its maturity curve and be able to drive really intelligent and efficient decisions. That's where tools help, that's also process help, that's also where technology actually helps.
And sorry to interrupt, Vamsi, just to add Yash here, There is a statistics which says that there is only about close to about approximately 30% of the known vulnerabilities are being used in attacks or whatever it is.
Absolutely.
There are 70% of the vulnerabilities have never been exploited in the world.
Right. Great. Great. Sure. So moving on, Swaminathan sir, what
Yes.
strategy? See, it's really critical for cybersecurity decision makers to have a proactive and intelligence-driven device-to-cloud cybersecurity approach. How do you think they can build such an approach? Adopt, ensure an open, proactive, intelligence-driven device-to-cloud approach. How do you think that's possible for CISOs?
Yeah, so as Bala or Vamsi clearly mentioned, you can't build a fort, covering all the possible risks that an organization perceives. In fact, most CISOs or CTOs go overboard in protecting their infrastructure and data. But the point is, it becomes counterproductive. It also becomes, the businesses suddenly realize that you're investing so much. What are you trying to protect? And are you trying to protect everything and anything? So it's important for us to understand the context in which the organization comes, the sector the organization is. If it is a banking sector, the perspectives are different. If it is a manufacturing sector, it's different. If it is any other sector, it is different. Even within the manufacturing setup, your exposure to countries, Europe, US, the perception is different. So one, I would say, a clear endpoint kind of security solution, a good data classification, a process which looks at all kind of exception reporting. The tendency is also to oversimplify the security posture in organizations. You just feel every exception is to be discarded. Even that is going to the other extreme. So you look at exceptional reporting very carefully, put in kind of intelligence to see of exceptional reportings are coming in. Like Vamsi was saying, if there is anything which is a harmless kind of a malware that is sitting on the system, but you may not realize what damage it can cause over a period of time, what kind of information that it starts storing as a part of its code. So it's important for us to look at all exceptions very closely, put in protocols to identify those exceptions, analyze those exceptions, and take timely corrective action.
Sure.
You can't keep postponing actions for another day. So those were some thoughts I thought we should consider.
Great, great. So coming to Mr. Mohammed Wasim, Wasim sir, there are also these technology models emerging. For instance, you've got SASE, which is a secure access service edge, and then you have the zero trust model. Do you think these models, these new technologies, could play a role in helping CISOs come up with an intelligence-driven device-to-cloud cybersecurity approach? How critical are these when it comes to this?
So I will categorize these as methodologies, right? But for these to be successful in achieving the objective would only happen when there is a greater level of collaboration between the security organization, the organization who are developing the digital asset. Because as Amarjit sir called out, is that knowing it is the key, right? Lots of people really do not know their landscape, right? And I've seen that, like providing business continuity when we actually went into the complete lockdown for our clients, right? People were actually dropping their jaw that they are running so much of infrastructure where they are not even getting value. So knowing is very important, right? Collaborating is very important. We cannot say that I'm the person who write, you do not interfere, write the code, you do not interfere in my job. And security guys cannot say that, once you have written it, come to me and I'll approve. So if we continue to be those guys and have a clear distinctions and very isolated job description, right? That is just an event waiting to happen. Now, with these methodologies are actually also coming into play for modern way of writing code, right? If you have a code which basically is a monolithic code, right? Zero trust, how would actually you implement zero trust? Because the monolithic has a specific way of delivering the business objective. So we have to also get into a state of letting go, right? Sunsetting things and moving it to the modern ways of writing digital assets that actually enables your business objective. The objective is to more being relevant to do business strategy versus running a business operations more diligently. So all these things have to like converge, and as I said earlier, right, these job descriptions have to come together. We have to converge on the job description, and more of collaboration is needed for such methodology and frameworks to be successful.
Sure. Great. Vamsi, your thoughts on emerging models like SASE and Zero Trust and their importance in building an intelligence-driven device-to-cloud
Absolutely.
approach.
Great, good frameworks. They give you, to Wasim's point and everything else that we've spoken, the idea is to simplify adoption of newer models to be able to simplify your overall business processes, right? I call that as accessing any application from any device from anywhere. And when you look at it from that point, you have to look at security angles as well. How do you protect everything that connects your application from anywhere, right? So you've got the network piece into it, you've got your data piece into it, you've got your device also ingrained into it. And this has to happen at the speed of business. So it is a very real problem with a real solution that is already available. And we see customers adopting that, more customers adopting now because it's the reality of the business. You secure devices on the go, secure your data on the go, secure applications on the go, make sure that there are microperimeters around the applications, and you're protecting everything in between. So it's a very simplified way of saying it, but there are really fast ways to do that. You can just get up and running in less than a couple of days for modern architectured applications, if you ask me.
Great. Great, gentlemen. We've had an amazing discussion till now. But we're fast running out of time. So final question before we wrap up the session. I'll start with Mr. Ninad. Ninad, sir, what cybersecurity trends do you see emerging in the next 1 or 2 years? And how should IT leaders align with them with respect to tools, technologies, people? Your thoughts here, sir.
Yeah, thanks, Vish. So majorly I understand that there are something which are going to do more about EDRs, endpoint detection and response, some tools, and the EDRs are going to there. Then on the cloud access, SASE is going to play a big part because that is where your optimization is going to be. Cloud is going to be a big time player in the market now. Yeah, many players are providing many different services. Yeah, but a collaborative approach, as we have discussed, on what suits me the best is something to be talked about going forward. Again, I would like to emphasize with the leading technologies that are being implemented, we need to protect our weakest link in the blockchain, which is in the entire chain, sorry, not blockchain, but in the chain, which is always going to be a people. And training around that with different ways, innovative ways of doing that will play a big role.
Sure, great. Mr. Harsh, what do you feel are the trends in the next couple of years?
As per my views, I am looking at the investments which are which we must need to drive security. That is going to be business driven. Once your organization is, for example, if I take a example of cloud, if my cloud investment is around 1 CR for a year, I cannot have a security operations or security infrastructure going around it and spending 50-60 lakhs over a year, right? So what I feel is that the security investment which are coming, they has to have a business proportion according to it. Secondly, the security will take a back-end seat. Until now, with the traditional security approaches by which we were securing our organization, be it logical security, physical security, access management, these were all different end approaches. Now, in the coming year, the focus will be shifting on the where security will be governed, with the back-end. More tools, more AI-driven technology will come up, and they integrate multiple products in between. And by correlation, they will manage everything from the back end. Peoples will become meaningless in the security because once it's become AI driven, like Wasim said about his engagement on the AX. So what I feel is that we should evolve toward this, and we should evolve our workforce also to be more engaged, more developed on the part, right? Apart from that, we should also do a continuous assessment of our infra using red teaming, and maybe we can launch a bug bounty program on your website to be more secure and uh, see on the sidewalk where we are lacking on. So this will give us a fair idea, where we can also emerge towards.
Sure. Mr. Jackson?
From my side, I would say I broadly classify it across two areas, which is internal trends that will drive cybersecurity activities, things like we touched on it briefly, the continuing onslaught of digital journey, the transformation that is happening. So bringing in things like IoT and stuff like that. And also, things like the data democratization, so wherein data starts flowing to everybody and anybody in the organization. How do we protect that, continue to maintain the privacy? So these are some of the trends internally which will drive cybersecurity. From an external perspective, of course, from a tech side, you can see things like the very same things that we want to adopt for benefiting our business is going to be adopted by the threat actor. So things like AI, ML, stuff like that is going to get, and any attack as a service. So ransomware as a service, hack as a service, access as a service. This is going to go. This sheer scale of the attacks is going to keep going up, is what I believe in. So our systems have to be geared for that. And one final aspect from an external perspective is we have to get a bit more nuanced about, the geopolitical situation around where we are. That drives a lot of things. Now, I mean, it's not news to the CISOs on the forum over here that in the last 1 month, we've seen a spike in attacks from a certain neighbor. Now, this is not surprising. It's not like they woke up one day on the wrong side of the bed and decided that they're going to attack us. This was in the making. So I think our strategies, our future plans should have these kind of geopolitical nuances taken into consideration. And we should chart our journey also using these things. These are a couple of trends from my side, I think, for the future.
Sure. Great, Mr. Jackson. Vamsi, final comments from your end. What trends do you see for CISOs and what's the way forward for them?
So I agree with all the comments that I've made. The way I look at it, the what is going to get more complex. What you need to protect is going to get that more complex because there's a lot of trends that define that. Automation is going to make it that much more easier for people to access. Data democratization, to Jackson's point, is going to make availability of data ubiquitous across different departments, across different organizations, and all of those things. So the what is getting more complex. But business speed, geopolitical reasons, all of that is going to become that much more relevant from a protection perspective. So it needs to be simpler. The how needs to be simpler. The what is that much more complex. These are two things, and the win part of it is always now. So
yeah. Sure. Just to I mean add to what Vamsi is saying. It's a very different landscape or the kind of moments what CISOs have to live through every day, right? So it's completely changing. So 2 years is pretty far ahead, if you're talking about that, Yash. But one of the recommendations what I keep telling my peers is, you can't control what you can't control, right? You don't know what ransomware is going to hit you, how they're going to hit you. Nobody thought about SolarWinds. Now it's a different case. So you can't control something, or you can't be prepared for what you don't know, right? But you can protect what you can control, right? I mean, you have a boundary, your assets, your visibility, those layers. So the threat can come from any kind of a form or factor, any kind of malicious activity, any kind of malware. So the basic thing is people have to understand the entry and exit points, the technology which is weaving around those entry and exit points, and have prevention, detection, or kind of alerting mechanism which is going to tell you that there's something wrong or something has already gone wrong. Then you can look into the protection part of it, respond to it. So unless if that is being understood and broken down to pieces, and the CISO has got a visibility on end-to-end part of it, I don't think forget about 2 years. They won't even be able to sustain 2 months.
Wow.
It's going to be very difficult.
Sure.
Yes, can I have just 5 seconds?
Yeah, please go ahead.
I mean, I looks like I'm very young to the cybersecurity, and definitely I've learned a lot today from these guys. One point I think we should also talk about is the cyber insurance. That is something which is predominantly very effective and important when it should cover the ransomware as well. That's
okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Great. Thank you so much, gentlemen. That's all we have time for. To sum up today's discussion, the need of the hour for technology leaders is to simplify security while accelerating digital transformation. As enterprises go down the path of digital transformation and accelerated cloud deployment, they will have to protect their crown jewels. And to do that successfully, security leaders will have to leverage a solution that enables them to improve productivity and efficiency with advanced threat prevention, AI-guided investigations, better detection response, and data protection across endpoints, network, and cloud. The key lies in aligning with the right partner who offers SaaS solutions that are cloud managed and backed by strong services and also offer lower TCO and easier experience. With this, we would like to bring this session to a close. Thank you very much, panelists, for your time and those wonderful inputs. And I would also like to thank our viewers for sparing time and watching this session. Thank you all. Stay healthy, stay safe.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank
you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thank you.